The Athletic.
Hello and welcome to the Tifo Football Podcast. I'm Joe Devine, and I'm now joined by Seb Stafford-Bloor.
Hello, Joe Devine.
Oh, guten Tag, Herr Stafford-Bloor. Was hast du? Hello? No. Brutal. Okay. And also joined by the big bull. It's JJ Bull.
Hello. Is Seb actually gone?
No, I'm still here, but we like our awkward silences.
Oh, I was so confused. I was like, oh no.
He's just playing the comedic note just a little too long there, but that's fine. He's learning, no big deal. We're here today to talk about European football. Quick note: we record this on a Thursday, and this releases on a Friday, so we don't actually know who's gone into the Europa League final. But cool. What about that Roma turnaround, JJ? Hey.
Oh. When Francesco Totti came in as a substitute through the roof, like Batman in Batman Returns, I was surprised, but it made for excellent television. So
surprised but delighted. Yeah, we've no idea what happened, so can't talk about that. But I hope you've enjoyed watching those games. If you did, what we did talk about was the Manchester Cities, the PSGs, and we talked about the Chelseas and the Real Madrids. And it was very exciting. We've got a Champions League final, all English, an all-English Champions League final. What, there you go. That's a thing. So we talked about that, and it was good fun, wasn't it, Seb? What did we talk about, Seb? What came up in today's episode? Keep them tantalised.
Well, we did quite a lot about Real Madrid and Chelsea and Manchester City PSG. We spent some time talking about PSG's massive tantrum, whether Kylian Mbappe might have helped them avoid that massive tantrum. Talked about what it meant to Pep Guardiola. We all made ice cream noises over Phil Foden. That will be explained later in the podcast, yeah. And then you rather rudely cut me off ahead of a point
I forgot to say something as well. I forgot to say that I watched a bit of the game last night, the Chelsea game, on the BT Sport Manager mode. Not sponsored by BT as far as I'm aware.
Cool.
But
cool.
it did look cool. It had little player names that came up above them whenever they got the ball. Actually, it was kind of distracting. I turned that bit off after about 10 minutes. But they had a little tactics board on the bottom right, and you could see where all the players' dots were in real time. And it was pretty inventive. Kudos to whoever did that at BT Sport. Again, I'm pretty sure we're not sponsored by them, but just thought it was fun. All right, well that's the intro all wrapped up for today. Now here's some music, and then once that's finished, there'll be a podcast. All right, thanks. Bye. Let's begin. Manchester City 2, brackets 4, brackets 1-0 PSG. Lovely game. Snow. There was snow. A wonderful setting in Manchester. What happened to the orange ball? We'll come to that, maybe. I forgot to look it up, so we might not come to that. Fabulous performances, of course, from Mahrez, Foden, and Fernandinho, but particularly from Diaz and Stones. Is this, JJ, what Manchester City have been missing since Company? A truly excellent CB pairing, a la Rio and Vidic or something, take it up a notch, because it felt like an extremely complete performance.
yeah, they've needed someone exactly like Ruben Diaz. I think you can have all your beautiful technicians and all your players moving around in pretty patterns, but you also need someone who's a bit mental, especially at the back, who comes in and throws himself around. I think kind of typified by when he launches himself with his head at a ball from about 5 yards in the 6 yard area, I think it was, and then celebrates it. Oh, yeah, it's crazy. It's like when you see a small child at a wedding or something, like it falls off like the top of a shelf. I don't know why it's up a shelf, but falls off, and then everyone's like, whoa, and it gets up and laughs because it's quite enjoyed the feeling of it. That's what Diaz is like. But it seems to be quite contagious around, like John Stones is now celebrating, making blocks and tackles, as though that's now his favourite thing to do rather than just keep the ball. And it reminds me of, there's a book that I've mentioned a few times before in different places called The Captain Class. I can't remember who's written it, which is a shame. But it's about all the greatest teams in history share one thing in common, and it's not the manager or a star player or anything. It's a certain kind of character who is the captain, like a kind of water carrier, or not the most talented, technical, proficient players, but someone who will like endure any amount of pain to make sure they get a win. Like they'll do anything to get a win. Like if they have to batter someone, they'll do it. If they have to get battered, they'll do it. And Diaz is becoming a little bit like, I suppose, Man City's Carlos Puyol, who was a good example of it in the book when Guardiola was at Barcelona. So you got all these lovely players around him, but you need Puyol in there to give it that. I can't think of a word, but I'm going to say because that works for it.
The book written by Sam Walker, of
Yes,
course.
this one.
A good book. I haven't read it. Is it good?
I loved it. Yeah.
Yeah,
I keep talking.
I've heard about it.
Yeah.
People said it was real good. Seb, this felt very different, didn't it? It felt, this year versus previous years where Manchester City have exited the competition at an earlier stage. This one, it didn't feel like a totally ordinary Manchester City win where they sort of grind down an opponent through attack and scoring more goals and all the rest of it. It felt, I don't know, it felt sort of more mature.
It felt more mature and it felt a little bit less fatalistic. I think in previous years, City have definitely had the talent to win the European Cup before, but there's always been this impending doom about their performances in the knockout stages, and there's always been this kind of sense that at some point something is going to go wrong, and increasingly in stupid ways. If you look at sort of the exits to Monaco and particularly Tottenham, if you look at some of the mistakes that were made that led to goals, or some of the things that happened to those teams, it's just that team occupied a very strange place in European football. But this was great. Yeah. This was like, beyond all the kind of Grur, Puyol, Chiellini defending, which was really impressive. It was, up until the last 15 minutes when a couple of City players really tried hard to rule themselves out of the final. That was weird, wasn't it? When the game kicked off and you just thought, all you have to do with this game one is not get sent off, and it's fine. And it's fine.
I'm so glad De Bruyne was taken off.
Yeah, but you had weird stuff like Zinchenko steaming into a confrontation right in front of the referee. Ederson running 40 yards to get involved, to kind of half, pull players apart from one another, but also to get involved a little bit. It was a bit weird. I don't know. Maybe
though. That was because when his teammate was on the floor, one of the opponents sort of picked the ball up and dropped it in his face.
Yeah, Van Persie did it, didn't he? Yeah. Do you remember when that happened to Van Persie at Swansea and Ferguson said, you could have killed him?
Yeah. But the interesting thing about this game as well is they looked like a team that they looked like the experienced team at this point in the competition. They looked like they knew exactly what they needed to do to win, that they'd been here before, that they weren't fazed by it at all. And that's the interesting thing about this team. They haven't won the Champions League before. Many of these players haven't. Obviously, Pep Guardiola has been there before. But we've talked a lot over the last few years about what happens to him during big fixtures like this. The old cliche of him potentially, apparently overthinking things. This sort of didn't feel like that at all. It felt like a huge, huge step forward, not only just because of the actual result in terms of beating a big team and getting into the final, and very likely, I assume, coming out of that final as a victor. We can talk about that later. But it felt like a sort of huge, symbolically a huge step forward too. And one of the central figures of that symbol, who's been there for a long time now and been there throughout the last few of those steps up, was Fernandinho, who of course was in for Rodri from the first leg on his 36th birthday. Outstanding performance. Was that just down to rotation, JJ?
I don't think it was. I think it was very. He was chosen specifically for what he could bring to the team. Tactically, what City did was really impressive, and I think talking about Fernandinho, but I think you can see it typified by Mahrez, who's holding himself back and making sure the kind of player is very individualistic. You'd think normally, but he's completely part of the unit. And then you have Fernandinho, who's in there buzzing about and winning tackles and intercepting. But the thing I noticed most about Fernandinho was that whenever he was committing fouls he should probably be booked for, and then he seems to get away with somehow. Like he just sort of calmly walks off. He's nailed that little post tackle-ness perfectly, so the referee doesn't want to book him. But whenever he would go into someone with Neymar, he would then quickly go over and stroke his head or put his hand on his shoulder and be like, "It's okay, don't worry."
Yeah. He did keep stroking his head, didn't he?
Yeah, but maybe that's just what they do. But then I think that there's a certain thing, and I've written this in notes to do in your voice, where it seems to be that if maybe Neymar is best when he's mad, when he's furious. So Fernandinho was doing this to extinguish the flames of fury, and
That's a really good job.
and by doing that, stroking his head, he was reducing his anger levels each time, and that made for a lesser Neymar.
A lesser Neymar. Very nice. Very nice. Yeah. Well, anyway, Fernandinho, great player, and I do agree that walk off afterwards is very important, isn't it? Because you can't walk so quickly, not looking at the referee with your head down, sort of being submissive to the yellow card. You can't do that because you're making yourself easy to card. You can't be confrontational and stay there and stare out the referee because you're asking for the yellow card. It's quite a hard thing to master, isn't it? But Fernandinho, in a game where many people were yellow carded. Fernandinho, who I believe you've written here in your notes, made the joint most number of fouls, managed to avoid it, as he always does, which is a remarkable skill and something I think we've even made a video about it. Alex wrote about City's tactical fouling a year or two ago. It's probably worth having a quick look at online there. Anyway, all of this is great, but let's not let it take away from the attack, which was also pretty ruthless in its efficiency. Mahrez, of course, with a couple of goals. Also, a quick note on defensive Mahrez. He made another amazing block in his own box. I think he did 2 of those in the first leg as well. That's obviously not an accident. But Phil Foden, who is basically Messi at this point, Seb.
There was a wonderful moment in commentary where, because there are no fans in stadiums at the moment, you can often hear a little bit of sound leak from one commentary position to another. And in the German commentary, there's a moment in, I think, about the 76th, 77th minute where Foden takes the ball with one touch, roulettes forward up the pitch, and you can hear someone off camera, not involved in the German commentary, it sounded like an English commentator, just make that noise that you make when you appreciate good skill, the kind of, that. And it was like being in the pub, but I don't want to I've seen a few people throw around comparisons and talk about, he's next Gascoigne or he's English football's version of Messi. Like, he's none of those things. He's a really, really, really good player who's just brilliant to watch at the moment. He's in that place where he's evolved to a point where he can affect games at this level, and yet he isn't inhibited by any of the fear which sometimes grips players on that sort of stage. I don't know whether that's a empty stadium thing or it's unique to Phil Foden. I don't know. But at the moment, he's hit a sweet spot of form where everything he does is just a joy. It just looks brilliant. Absolutely
it's
brilliant.
Amazing, isn't it? Incidentally, that noise is the noise I make when I dig into the ice cream. You know what I'm saying? It's the same kind of joy, isn't it? It really is.
It's a universal noise, though. I think it it cuts through the cultures. Like, everybody knows what that noise means.
It's the dribbling noise. It's the one that Randy from South Park always makes. That sort of delicious noise. JJ, you think Phil Foden's one of the best young players you have ever seen?
Yes, I really do. But I thought it for a little while. There's a few players who I think are properly next level. I thought the same of Mbappe when I saw him. I thought the same of Haaland when I saw him. I think Wesley Fofana at Leicester is like next level. And Foden is, I just love watching him. The thing that I think is best, you can sort of rely on his first touch as though he's a video game player. It's never going to go anywhere else other than where he wants. But it's the decision making. It's always the right thing, and everything's weighted perfectly. Like even his assist from Mahrez at the back post when he makes the 1-2 with De Bruyne to break away. He's so quick. Like, everything about him is just exactly what you want of a player. He's quick. He's dynamic. He can do these little tricks that you like, which produce the ice cream noise, and then he picks the right weight of pass to make sure that the final action is always the right one. And he reminds me a little bit of the way he sort of floats through games sometimes, like Zidane. Like, it's very, it looks pretty, it looks nice, but there's actual cause and effect to all of it. It's not there it doesn't do a roulette for pointlessness. He does it because it's how he wins the little half yard of space to then take the defender on. And without having done that, he wouldn't be able to do it.
He's 20 years old.
Do you remember how in early video games, like 16-bit stuff, like when you were when you passed the ball to a player, the ball became kind of part of the graphic. Like it just became like, you know, part
Didn't
of his
bounce
foot.
up at all.
It didn't bounce up at all. It just became part of like a second head or something. And that's
And
what
when
it's
you
like.
turned left, you turned left all at once, and there was no
Exactly
kind
that.
of
But
curve to your
that's
run.
like watching Foden's first touch. There's no separation. It just becomes part of him and he moves on. It's really rare to see that.
Yeah. I mean, tactically, he's extremely useful as well, JJ, right? Because he seems that he can play in a number of different positions. I'd like to talk about him as it relates to England a little bit later, but for Guardiola, it must be a treat to have somebody who could do, you know, 3 or 4 different things.
Oh, absolutely, especially within a system where you want so much rotation of positions, I should say. So, I mean, he's so quick. So you think because he's left-footed, you want to have him on the right, where he can come off onto his left foot and there, you know, play the final pass or take a shot, something like that. But he seems to be most useful out on the left, where he then also drifts inside or can go outside, and that unpredictability helps him because then defenders don't know which way to show him. It doesn't really matter because he can take you on either side. Also, I mean, he might end up as one of those free eights in the midfield when he gets slightly older, but that just might need a little bit more experience. There was something that Pep Guardiola talked about a lot of him is in terms of decision making was he needs to learn when to take a pause, like when to slow things down maybe. Yeah. And that'll be something I'd imagine that Guardiola will be quite good at teaching him to do. And that'll be when he ends up in that free 8 or something like that in the middle. He can play 10. I wonder what he'll do with England, but we'll talk about later, I suppose. So I won't go into that right now.
Oh, this is a big deal for Pep Guardiola. Speaking of as well, who despite lots of domestic success, hasn't been back to the Champions League since the final. Since he won it with Barcelona in 2012. It's 10 years, which is strange because he's been the biggest coach in the world for 10 years. But this will be a huge moment for him, won't it, Seb?
Of course, because he's also suffered quite a few bad moments. I mean, we've talked about a couple of the ones that he's experienced with City, but also some of those Bayern Munich defeats weren't great, if you think about it. The one to Real Madrid sticks in my mind when they got battered at the Allianz Arena. I think it's sort of, to me, it's like, it's part of that story arc that a lot of great managers have, in that you have a great burst of early success. You have something that you have not controversy or not adversity, but just something which kind of makes people question you. And for Guardiola, clearly that's been, well, you haven't won the European Cup without Messi and Iniesta, etc. Xavi. And then there's a sort of a reinvention.
You haven't won it without De Bruyne.
We have. Without Phil Foden. It's like a Tom Cruise movie, isn't it? Most like great managerial arcs. You have the success, you have something which afflicts your confidence, takes it all away, your kind of goose dying moment, and then you come back a little bit better with a few sort of adaptive behaviours which make you overall a sort of a better coach. And then
you graduate to Zargon 5.
And what's that? What is Zargon 5?
I don't know. I can't remember the specific name for the different levels of Scientology, so I just said Zargon.
Okay. I didn't want to go into I've just separated myself from Jose Mourinho's online army, and that, if anything, is a little bit weirder than Scientology. So if we can kind of have a few weeks without that kind of thing, that would be most welcome.
Sure, let's keep it clean. On you go.
Yeah, absolutely. Anyway, yes, it would be good for him to win a European Cup.
Oh, thanks, Seb. That's really good. I wasn't sure. All right, let's do PSG then, because there's stuff to say about the PSG. Referee, though, first, who, for all intents and purposes, had a pretty good game. PSG's players didn't think so, though, did they, JJ?
No, but I thought they were at it from the first whistle. They were trying to win free kicks they were never going to get and falling over. And there's just something I noticed of both games this week, was that the referee wasn't falling for any shenanigans in both games. So there's often that thing where a footballer turns his back on a player, waits for him to get within a few centimetres and falls over to buy a free kick. And they quickly realised that they weren't getting away with that and they didn't like it. And then, after the game, you had Ander Herrera talking to our MC Sport saying, we talk about respect with referees. The referee tonight said, fuck off to Leandro Paredes. If we say that, we get a 3 or 4 match ban. They do that all the time.
Every game.
Yeah, all
This
the
is the
time.
wonderful thing about no crowd, that you can literally hear them doing it over and over again. I was surprised at the beginning of the year when I started to watch these games with no crowd sound, listening to the way that the players and the managers were talking, and really thinking more than ever before, it would suck to be a referee. I think I've said on this podcast, I could not deal with the way that football players talk to a referee if I was the referee. I'd be red carding people left, right, and centre just for minor acts of lack of respect. I think so. I think that's it's a bit of a sour grapes comment. I do like Ander Herrera. I think he's a good player, and I like his attitude. But this is a strange thing, isn't it, Seb?
Yeah, it is. And it also, I feel like it's one of those instances in which when players say this, they don't really think about how they're going to come across, because I've heard this so many times before. It's amazing how many times in like a losing situation, a player is able to find a situation where he's got a grievance with the referee. And you talked about like what you can hear with no crowds, but there's no artificial crowd noise on German TV, and the language is incredible, and not only the sound of it, but how it's delivered. So you get players screaming obscenities in referees' faces or linesmen's faces, like including words that we can't use on the podcast because YouTube shouts at us if we do that. But it's such hypocrisy. It's ridiculous.
I also think in their minds they'll be thinking about the way that they'll be treated as a result of that. Even if the truth came out that somebody was red carded for swearing aggressively at an official, I do think, half the fans who watched that game, or certainly the fans of the team of the suspended player, would all think that was absurd, that the referees couldn't take it, or that they were overreacting, or you know what I mean?
Yeah, but do you remember that incident with Darren Drysdale and Alan Judge in the Ipswich Northampton game when like Darren Drysdale's a referee in the Football League and he squared up to a player who'd been like abusing him, and Darren Drysdale's about like 8'6", and Alan Judge is very much not. And it's a great image because it's just a referee that's been pushed a little bit too far. And there was a transcript of all the things that came out, and you can look it up. I won't repeat it on the pod, but if anyone wants to Google it, you just think, fair enough.
Well, what if, in which case, you think about that, the people who sort of explode like that, or as you describe, have finally had enough. It's because they've been trying to hold stuff in, right? What if we just take this example here, exactly what Ander Herrera said, and we make that a rule, right? Where the referees get to say whatever they want. I'm sure Leandro Paredes probably deserved it. He was probably doing something that,
Who hasn't wanted to tell Marco Verratti to fuck off at some point? I mean, fair enough.
That's what I mean. So, like, what if you're the referee and someone comes up to you and they go, "Oh, that's a yellow card," and you go, "Fuck off. It's not. Piss off.
I'm
back off
absolutely
over
fine
there."
with that from referees.
It'd be great.
Like,
It'd be
yeah, I'm
really
fine with
fun, and there'd be some more drama involved, wouldn't there, JJ?
Well, absolutely. I sometimes play Sunday League really badly, and when at this level of Sunday League, if there's no linesman basically, so often the substitutes have to run the line. And what I thought was interesting, that one time that I ran the line was the left back on my own team screamed like horrible things at me because I correctly didn't call someone offside. I was like, I'm out. This is not for me.
Do you still play for the
after
same
the
Sunday
game?
League team, JJ?
Very rarely. Very
Yeah.
rarely. Yeah. Not
I
because
want to
of
know
that
how
guy.
you felt afterwards, after it finished. Though, was there any animosity between you and this person?
No, because that's another thing with football, is that you can scream at someone and like hate them for 90 minutes. As soon as the whistle goes, like everything ends, and it's very odd that does exist. Like it's just a battle for 90 minutes as long as you're within that. Some people don't seem to quite understand that, and then they do. I mean, there's some weird things I've seen at 11-a-side. People getting sent off and refusing to leave, and so they're walking around the pitch, and the referee's trying to cancel the game and stuff. I'm sure everyone has weird stories.
I feel like that almost happened in this game, didn't it? Because, of course, Mahrez scored the second goal on 64 minutes. And from that point onwards, it felt a bit as though PSG's players kind of gave up and really started diving into those tackles. I'm looking through my notes to try and remember who it was that was red-carded. Of course, it was Di Maria for stamping on the player, Fernandinho, off the pitch. And maybe trying to make it look a little bit like a slip and slide. And then being enraged at the referee and taking quite a while to leave the pitch. Everything sort of descended into near chaos, didn't it? It had the feeling of a game that was about to fall off the edge, but never quite did.
Yeah, I also really enjoyed how Di Maria sort of tackles him like a spider coming out of a small hole. Like, meh! That sort of noise. Take that! What are you doing? What was it you were saying, Seb, about the camera angle of Pochettino with that?
Yeah, so JJ and I were talking about this before we started recording, and I found I went to watch some highlights just to brush up this morning, and there's an angle of it which shows Di Maria stamping on Fernandinho kind of poetically falling onto that mound of snow. And you can just see Pochettino in the background kind of shrugging his shoulders in a kind of, for fuck's sake, gesture. There was no VAR review needed for that. It was perfect.
He sat down too, because he was extremely active throughout the game on the touchline. I wrote a note about the pace of the game, because certainly the first half of the first half was very, very fast. PSG were, straight out of the gates. It took Manchester City a little while to catch up, actually. And it felt like PSG were throwing the kitchen sink around 35 minutes. There's Pochettino on the sidelines egging them on, saying, let's go even faster. And as soon as this happened, he just sat down and put his head in his hands, and you didn't see him again. And it felt like he gave up too.
Yeah, he's like that though. He kind of actually the first ever game I covered from a press box was a Tottenham game that he was managing, and he's a great technical area chunterer. Like, he does just pace and swear and like hurl Spanish into the ether for much of the game. And when you see him sit down like that, it is kind of resignation. But he does always seem, even if his team are like 2 or 3 goals up, he does always seem really, really unhappy or antagonised by whatever he's watching on the field. And he's always kind of badgering the players near to him. So like it would always be a Christian Eriksen or a Kyle Walker or Danny Rose or someone. But he, I felt sorry for him because it was it was a tantrum. We talked a little bit on the WhatsApp about this, and it was just sort of, I can't decide whether PSG's reaction is just the result of a group of players not being used to that level of tension or not getting their way. It feels a little bit trite though and cliched to sort of reference that the French league isn't that competitive. Is this year, but it just feels like a little bit of a tired excuse. And in this instance, it just seems to be more about the players involved. Like Di Maria's got that in his locker, Ander Herrera is no shrinking violet, of course. Paredes is a little bit nuggety. I mean, I don't know. It wasn't very blaze of glory, was it? It was just a tantrum.
Nuggety.
Yeah, a bit nuggety. He was a bit sort of rough around the edges, and he's a bit abrasive to play against.
I thought it was a little bit like almost as if they were blaming the computer's against me. So it might, so if you're playing online, the game's against me. I might as well just get sent off. Take that, other person I'm playing online. I mean, it doesn't apply to Rocket League, Joe, sadly, but I think Pro Evo, I've definitely done this, where you just get the game abandoned because it's much more fun than losing 6-0.
I used to do that on Sensible Soccer. That used to be the most fun thing to do back in the day. You get 5 players sent off, and then the game was abandoned. And it was very easy to get a red card in Sensible Soccer. I think you guys may remember. Just slide into anyone from any angle other than the front, and straight red card.
You used to be able to slide over about 15 yards as well.
It was amazing. You could slide quicker than you ran. If you slid and got back up and slid, you would move faster than running, which... Little tip there for anyone playing Sensible Soccer. If
you were trying to score a header, your only option was to kind of like throw your player at the ball from about 20 yards away.
Yes.
In a kind of sort of diving forward position. Yeah.
There was on one of the old FIFAs, I think it was FIFA 98, I think it was something like that. There was
the
a
best
button.
FIFA Road to the World Cup. That's the best one.
I think it was that one. It might not. I might be wrong, but I think it was when there. There was a button that was just for like hard tackle, basically like deliberate foul, and it was amazing. I had it set as Q, and I still remember this. I was so young at the time. But then what you could do is go into a training game, and you could have 11v1, and then you could have 11 players just going like hard tackle again and again, and this one poor guy.
Oh no! Sadistic, JJ.
Yeah. It's like the equivalent of taking away part of the track on Roller Coaster Tycoon, so that the coaster.
So that you're.
I have a more recent experience of that. I've been playing the game Jurassic Park Evolution. Don't think I've mentioned this on here before.
Hey,
yeah.
No, sorry, it was just roller coaster tycoon. So,
Oh, I see. You've interrupted me to say something you could have said a bit later. Is that it?
no, this is really interesting, and
Oh, okay.
it will change part of your childhood.
It better be
learning
really good now, Seb.
It's really good. Okay, so one of the first PC games I ever played was Theme Park, which is kind of basically an early version of Roller Coaster Tycoon. And one of the interesting bits of it was that you could manipulate your park so that by making your chips really, really salty, you would force your customers to go and buy a Diet Coke immediately and make more revenue. And this was kind of, for about 20 years, this was a thing that you associated with Theme Park. I was talking about Theme Park on Twitter a couple of weeks ago, and somebody tagged themselves into the conversation who had worked as a programmer on the original Theme Park, and he said that is an absolute lie. It's an urban myth. I couldn't believe it. Yeah, couldn't believe it.
Oh.
Anyway, back to you, Joe.
Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. Yep, okay, really worth the instructions. Salty chips, not salty chips.
Can you feed the dinosaurs salty chips on Jurassic Park Evolution?
I'm not going to tell my story anymore as a punishment to Seb. How about that? How about that, Seb? You've been punished with your
I shall learn from this.
boring story that wasn't that boring and was actually kind of cool, and it's better than mine, and now I can't tell mine.
You're just going to sulk for the rest of the podcast.
It's going to get us sent off.
Mbappe didn't play due to a calf injury, of course. Injury to a small cow, you know? Not that, actually, to his leg. But we did see him in the first leg. It's an unfortunate miss for PSG. Of course it was. Of course it was. He's a fantastic player. But would it really have been that different with him there, Seb?
I don't think the situation suited PSG. I don't think if they'd gone to Manchester City with a lead, then you put Mbappe into that scenario, then it would have been very much like the Bayern Munich game, where they defended brilliantly, counter-attacked brilliantly, deservedly won the game. I don't know, like it felt a little bit pointless as soon as he didn't come on at half-time, or you just knew he just wasn't fit enough to be there, so it became a little bit of a moot point.
Also, like, he did play in the first leg. I appreciate he's one of the world's best players. I'm not saying that he's not. But he did literally play against this team in the first leg and didn't do a great deal and was managed pretty well by Manchester City. Is there any reason to suspect that would have been different in this game?
I don't know. I feel like the kind of the sum of the PSG attributes is not irrelevant, but kind of secondary to what we saw about the way that they managed themselves in those games. And Mbappe's got a little bit of that to him. He's a wonderful player, but he's no angel on the pitch, which I kind of like in a player. I don't want a sort of a Corinthian always, but he's, I don't know. Like I could have seen him getting embroiled in what happened. I'll put it that way. And I don't think him alone in that kind of game against that sort of opposition. I don't think one player is enough to make a difference. With that kind of deficit to
who
overturn.
didn't get embroiled in anything that happened, and who I frequently forgot was on the pitch. There we go. What does Mauricio Pochettino need to do then to make this PSG team better? Is it transfers? Is it a different system or team selection, JJ?
The predictable answer is that it's going to be a mixture of all of it, really, isn't it? But when you look at that team, the way it's built, I mean, you have Neymar, Mbappe, and Di Maria as their front three. So that's not giving you an awful lot of defensive cover. If you want to press high, you can't really do it with those, I would say. So then his midfield trio is Paredes, Gay, and Verratti. You could chuck someone like Herrera in, and they're all ball winners, more defensively minded. So it's a little bit almost like how Liverpool are built at the moment, where you have three forwards who do a lot of the creative work and running, and then three people behind them to protect the defence and to win the ball back to get forward to them. So that sort of setup would make them best, I would say, in transition, because you can win the ball and then use the pace of Mbappe to stretch the defence, which gives you space.
And you need amazing fullbacks, right?
Well, yeah, you need them to come in, and I don't know how good PSG's really are. And what we've seen with Pochettino, we can really, I would say, base it mostly on what Spurs played, and that was that kind of 4-2-3-1 where they would have, people always said it was a high press, but I think a lot of it was done like a mid-block, and they would make it really hard for people to get past them there, and then they would just be able to exploit it, and they had someone like Harry Kane who could win a game on his own. So I would imagine they'd look for someone who could someone who can move the ball better in midfield. So type of player I'm thinking off the top of my head, like Tony Kroos, but not the one right now. someone a bit younger who can play the ball. I mean, you say Verratti maybe be that kind of player, but
Leon Goretzka.
it just hasn't worked for whatever reason.
Adrian Rabiot.
Rabiot, ooh, that's a good shot.
Rabiot's the one. Like I feel like Rabiot was mismanaged by PSG.
Maybe, but again, he's not. I don't know. Maybe he is. Maybe you know more about Rabiot than I do. But I don't know if he's the solution to it. I feel that they're just maybe. It's that thing where you have a team. Maybe is if Neymar is their best player, are they actually better without him? That classic bit. I mean, you have to put Neymar in because he's such a good player. But they're not. They were very much a group of individuals, and then individuals tend to need a bit of creative freedom to be able to produce. But when you're playing against a team like Man City, who are very clearly a team with very talented individual parts, I think the team tends to win that every single time because they're more solid defensively, and PSG couldn't offer anything. Icardi was. I think Mbappe would have made a big difference. Just being able to stretch the defense, get in behind, offer more of a threat, and keep City pushed back a little bit. But they're going to need something. I guess that's why Pochettino gets paid lots of money.
Icardi got a 2 from L'Equipe. That's just brutal. That's just brutal.
Poor old Icardi. Anyway, that'll do for now. We'll be back in a moment to talk about a Chelsea and a Real Madrid. Okay, Chelsea 2 brackets 3. 1 brackets 1 nil. Sorry, dash 1 brackets 1-0 Real Madrid. You get the point. Tight performance from Chelsea defensively. Lots of missed opportunities going forward. So ultimately, it doesn't matter in the end. Because Real Madrid offered essentially nothing. It felt like the least good attacking performance I've seen from them in a really long time. We'll come to that. But first, Seb, was Frank Lampard really that bad?
We were talking about this last night, and that's probably a bit harsh because I think he's had a very important role in the evolution of some of those individual players.
Get him. Kick him while he's down.
Well, this is the thing, because you'd expect Thomas Tuchel to, whatever his Chelsea vision is, you'd expect it to be fully realised within about a year, 18 months. It's been, 4? And so there seems to be like a virtue, at least to players like Kai Havertz and Timo Werner, in Frank Lampard just not being there, which is quite damning.
Yeah.
I feel like it's Havertz especially. I know that there are caveats because he contracted COVID and he wasn't fit and he didn't really have a full pre-season. These are all mitigating circumstances, but the climb in his form since Tuchel arrived has been pretty dramatic.
I mean, the climb in everyone's form is dramatic. I mean, they're on an incredible run. They don't lose games. They suddenly defend. I mean, it felt like they had all the requisite parts there already. I think, not as I said, not wanting to be unfair to Frank Lampard, but not a huge amount has actually changed. Yet the results are exceptionally good, and we're now looking at a squad that I remember at the beginning of the season, not to make it about me or anything or say I was right, but I remember at the beginning of the season we did these sort of league table predictions, and I put Chelsea in second, I think, because on the basis of the transfers that they'd made, but also on the basis of the squad that they had at the time, they looked like they should be performing as they are now, and they just seem to perform so under par for such a long time. And the kind of excuse at the beginning is that, well, it's a new manager, we need to give the manager time to bed in or whatever. Thomas Tuchel comes and they go on like a 17-game unbeaten run or something off the bat.
Yeah. I mean, one thing though, did they defend that well on Wednesday night, or did Real Madrid offer very little beyond the Benzema header and that turn and hit that Edouard Mendy saved?
It's a chicken and egg situation, though, isn't it?
It is a little.
You could
No,
say
absolutely.
That the positive defending resulted in a lack of opportunities for Madrid. I mean, Madrid weren't great, but one of the reasons that they had very few chances were because there weren't many defensive mistakes, and they defended extremely well higher up the pitch, right, JJ? Tell me I'm right.
Yeah. Yes, you were right. It's odd because they only have two central midfielders at Kante. I mean, Kante is essentially counts for about 7 players on his own, and Jorginho. But what I noticed most about Chelsea is that to me, they don't feel like they're that good, yet they are. I know this is really bad analysis, but they must be so hard to play against because they don't give up the ball ever. They win it back really quickly. Whenever you attack them, they seem to have more players to your number of players every single part of the pitch you go to. So in defence, they always have at least 5, maybe 7 defending. So there's no real gaps. It's all quite compact. When they go forward, there are so many runners. There's so much energy going into it, and they're really intense in the way they press and win it back. Also, they're quite aggressive off the ball in the way they tackle it. They get really tight instantly, so you can't get away from them. And they dig in, they put in tackles, but it's all fair. There's no dirtiness to it, but it makes it really hard for the opposition to play. So when you've got, Real Madrid, I thought, suffered from a huge lack of pace. There's just no pace, no strength or power in that team whatsoever. And they can pass the ball, and they've got some skill. Players like Vinicius could do certain bits and pieces, but they don't have that dynamism that Chelsea seem to. And that's the sort of thing, what Lampard put in that Chelsea team was a team who attacked when lots of different rotations of positions, really quick to go, and it would be chaotic. So you couldn't really predict which players would be going where. Tuchel seems to have made it very specific what players have to do within their roles, but making them do it really intensely, and it's made them really good. Yeah, they are really good, aren't they?
Yeah, I think so. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong, but they look good.
They are.
One of the things that struck me though was that quite a few times, even in the first half when the game was still really in the balance and it hadn't but just become chaotic, when Real just seemed like athletically incapable of keeping up with Chelsea. And you saw like straight line runs from deep which just weren't being tracked, and kind of numerical mismatches that were kind of created out really like kind of rudimental situations. It was really strange because it was as if like Real just refused to learn the same lesson despite being exposed to the same problems again and again and again. I mean, how many times by the end of the game, it was probably about 7 or 8 breakaways, which were probably 3-on-3, 4-on-4, something like that. And it just seemed as
bizarre, if wasn't it?
There wasn't enough energy in the Real team to deal with that.
No, because there were breakaways that were 4-on-4 that became 4-on-3 when one of the 4 Real players just didn't carry on running.
And maybe that's partly a reason. Maybe that's partly the result of having a midfield base of players who are both in their 30s, and that's fine. But you presumably prepare for these things. If you're lining up against a side which is Mount, Havertz, Werner, just those 3 players by themselves, you're thinking, well, I'm going to have to watch myself in transition. You add Kante in that, who's always going to be a little bit box to boxy.
You just picked the ball off them in the worst places over and over again. I mean, it was so exceptional to watch, wasn't it? I love that man.
It's brilliant. Absolutely fantastic.
I love Kante. I think even example of this game would be he would be perfect for Real Madrid right now. It's exactly what they need in their midfield with a bit of energy. Yeah, and the way that Zidane set that system up, it's like a 3-5-2, but Hazard dropping deeper. So it's almost a 3-diamond 3. In a way, certain parts of the game they're playing. It was very much suited to them playing almost in transition, but they don't have the speed or, like Seb saying, the athleticism to really play that way. So the whole thing didn't work, and Chelsea had them.
Can we say that Kante is one of the best players ever in the Premier League? We can, can't we?
I think that's fair. Fair.
Can we put him in the top 10?
I suppose it depends what you emphasise. Depends what
just
you
best.
like.
Just best.
No, because there was always going to be a bias towards goal scorers and attacking players, isn't there?
Well, no, but it's just us doing it. It's not. We're not asking.
Just us doing
else.
it as kind of the most influential players ever.
Yeah. Well, no, just the best players ever. That was the category.
Okay. Would you? Okay. Well, then you kind of have to compare him with players in his position. So how would you compare him with a?
No, you don't. Just
no,
the best
yes, you do.
players ever of the Premier League.
But
you can have any player you want.
I still think I take Patrick Vieira.
But you could have both of them.
But that midfield doesn't really make as much sense.
I don't mean.
Also,
a team. I don't mean the best 11. I just mean the best 10 players.
Stop changing the rules. Stop changing the rules. You're just adding new bits. You're just making up stuff to complicate the.
No. Hey, shush up. A word on Kai Havertz, please. We started to see him flourish, haven't we? We have started to see him flourish, haven't we? JJ, go.
I thought on Tuesday's podcast we said that he's not peaked yet, but he may peak soon. It's coming, but not yet. It's too early.
Yeah, we talked about this, didn't we?
Yeah.
We already talked about it. Yeah.
But he is. I mean, he seems like a nice boy, a lovely player. A solid all-round.
A solid
guy.
all-round boy.
Of
That
all the
guy's
boys.
a solid boy, yeah. Big time. Okay. A word on Edouard Mendy, por favor, because he made a couple of huge saves. And for a keeper who's had, a tiny, tiny rocking chair start, coming into, replace a very, very expensive number one, has to prove himself very quickly. Strange circumstances, you could say. This must have been a huge moment for him. Champions League semi-final to perform like that. Match winning. You might say, Seb.
Match changing, definitely. The save from Benzema, where his view is obscured by Benzema shoots around the centre half and he makes a really good save at full
It
stretch.
looked like he started diving before he saw the ball.
Yeah, but then I would say, okay, if that goes wrong and Benzema whips it in the other corner, then that's a problem. But then you just put it down to good goalkeeping, good anticipation, good positioning. If he doesn't, he probably doesn't reach it because it was heading right for the bottom corner. And that changes the game, because if Real score then none of the weaknesses that we've discussed, like none of the things about their lack of pace, all of that stuff becomes less relevant, because then they can just sit in a low block and control the game potentially.
Well, there we go. That was Chelsea. The final will be Chelsea-Manchester City. A repeat of the FA Cup final. I would say not the most exciting final. I was kind of hoping for an overseas team in there to spice things up a little bit. It doesn't feel hugely Champions League finally, does it? But there's also a chance, if Arsenal go through as well, it'll be all 4 English teams in the 2 finals. And what do you make of that, Seb?
I was actually on mute having a little conversation with my wife about something. Sorry, you have to go to JJ for that.
No, that's fine. That was the best kind of response I could hope for. Let's talk about Real Madrid now. Troubling squad dynamics, aren't they? Any of the younger players, developing players, destined to fill those holes? Because Vinicius Jr., for example, very changeable. The impact subs that came on last night, including Asensio, made no impact. You felt actually what they needed, as well as Kante, obviously, was a Pulisic-type character who, Chelsea brought off the bench and was amazing and sort of made that second goal alongside Kante. But there doesn't seem to be anybody on Madrid's bench at the moment that could bring in that kind of certainty in performance. And also, discussing starters too, there is, of course, the Hazard situation. Hazard didn't have a fantastic game. He disappeared a little bit into it. Was a late substitute off onto the bench, and also was pictured smiling after the game, which angered people so much that there seemed to be a whole show dedicated to this, or at least the intro of a show. I don't know what it was, some Spanish football show where they did an extremely dramatic opening with all thunder and lightning, and a man with too dramatic of pauses. I found the translation of that, by the way, for anyone who had seen the video. What was said was, Hazard at the end of the game is unacceptable. We are angry. We don't understand him. He cannot stay at Real Madrid for another second. So, troubling squad dynamics.
For another second?
For another second.
So he has to be, P45 today?
Well, I think the moment that the man says that.
Just has to, trapdoor opens up beneath him and he has to go back to Chelsea. It's just so childish.
It is a strange thing, isn't it? No impact on the game, though, of course. Where do Real Madrid go from here, JJ?
It looks like they need something of a rebuild. I think the teams that have done very well. I mean, Real Madrid aren't a bad team. They're in the semi-final of the Champions League, to make that clear. So they're not particularly bad, but they are aging, and they're going to have to replace these big stars. There's all the noise about them bringing in someone like Erling Haaland to be their striker. Benzema's still great. He's scoring heaps and heaps of goals. He's a brilliant player.
Yeah, he's not one of the problems.
No, not at all. I think what they need is a bit more energy. They need more energy probably in the midfield and just to have more athleticism to them, more speed, more strength, more power.
They seem a bit flabby.
Yes, and I think Zidane's had to adapt his tactics all season long to try and make up for shortcomings in his team. When you look at Marcelo still plays. He's a little bit older than maybe you'd want him to be. You've got Ramos, who is 35?
36, 35, something like that.
And could leave at the end of the season.
Yeah, and you've got Casemiro's 29, Modric 35, 36, Kroos is 31. You've got players the young group coming through would be people like Fede Valverde, Rodrigo, who's still developing, Vinicius Jr. I mean, Asensio wasn't long ago talking about as one of the best young players in the world, but he's 25.
Yeah.
He's obviously suffered
Yeah.
quite bad injuries, but he's still a good player. Eder Militao, I think he was decent in the 2 semi-finals, 23, so he's coming through. It's going to be, I mean, they don't have any money. This is the problem. So, they have none. And they're going to find a way to get some somehow, but it's going to be like these...
They're going to build a theme park.
And make the chips really salty, and that's what they're going to do. The new Bernabeu is going to have like chips that make your tongue start to decay while you eat them. And the only solution is Real Madrid juice, which costs £7 for a 250ml bottle.
Real Madrid juice. Oh, that would be fun. Anyway, screw them. They're out now. Let's discuss before we move on. Mason Mount, England. Discuss. That's what you've written there, Seb. You've said there's a lot of Frank Lampard about him, you've said, which is hardly surprising. But the attacking positions he takes up are pretty similar. And then I've written, as if to try and do the sort of YouTube clickbait version of what you've written, I've written Mount, Foden, Grealish. Yeah? Different types of players, but it feels a little bit like Scholes, Lampard, Gerrard to me. Which one, JJ, honestly, which one excites you more of those two talking points? Which one do you prefer?
Oh, I'm gonna. I like them both.
JJ.
I like them both, Joe.
No,
and
no.
JJ, you stand firm. Stand firm.
Yeah.
Don't let him bully you at this early point, because if you allow it, it will only continue. Just
I don't want that.
line in
but-
the sand, JJ.
In which case, I will just talk over you both. Mount, Foden, Grealish, very exciting to me. I want them all in the team. Is there a way you could do that, JJ? Could you get them all in the team?
I think there is. So you play Foden where he's playing for City at the moment, which would be probably wide left. If you're playing that 4-3-3 that Southgate has been playing recently, you play, or 4-2-3-1, you can play Foden wide left or wide right. I think you play him wide left for now. And then you can play Mount as one of the 2 8s, which he's good at, and it means he can join in as a 10 when he wants to. And you could play Grealish as an 8 as well if you're going really attacking against a bad team, like maybe against Scotland. But yeah, it'd be very, very attacking. Then you need someone to anchor that, which is going to be Rice, and you leave them all on his own. If you're playing like Man City could probably play Mount and Grealish, because the team would be so well structured that they'd be able to adapt to any turnovers, and they can transition to the defensive really quickly, and it would work. But I think at international level, it's going to be very difficult. You could play Grealish one wing, maybe on the left, and you have Foden and the other on the right, and that would be the way you get them all in as one. But it's...
Then you lose Sancho or Rashford or whoever else might play on the right?
Well, it depends. I think so. I mean, for international football, I think the team who's most defensively sound tends to win, and that tends to be so. If you put too many attacking players in, you don't. I mean, England did so well in that World Cup because they were really good at corners. So if you get loads of tall lads in, that might be the way you win. And then you put someone like James Ward-Prowse in just because he can hit a set piece like that, which is another person you need to think about for these sorts of things.
Okay.
But Foden has to
Seb,
play
letting
regardless.
you in now. What do you think?
About Mason Mount?
Yeah, about your talking point.
I like my talking point. I thought it was worthy. I thought it was valuable to the pod discussion.
So if I gave you 1 minute, what would you like to say about it?
Well, I really...
That's
like
the end
Mason.
of the podcast. It's been fantastic to have JJ here. Again, thank you, JJ. We'll speak to you next week. Seb, lovely to see you as always. Real pleasure. And thanks to producer Ollie, who's as valiantly stepped in for producer Adonis while he's off
Reproducer
raising
Adonis.
a baby. That's reproducer Adonis, as one very wry commenter wrote on the YouTube video. That was a good comment, wasn't it? We will be back on Tuesday next week with more reviewing the weekend. I haven't told either of you this yet, but I have to pack because I'm moving house, so I'm going to ask one of you to stand in my place. So I won't be here for that episode. But it'll be a 3-way, including Alex Stewart, who will have returned, which is very, very exciting, isn't it? Okay. Thanks to you for downloading this episode. Remember that you can get The Athletic. That's a good thing. And farewell to all the Tifos. We'll be back next week. Au revoir.
The Athletic.